everyone, it's really nice to meet you. I'm Ruth Hartnoll. I'm the founder and content director of Matchstick Creative, and I'm joined by my colleague Aaron, who is also strangely called Ruth Hartnoll on his screen because we're signed into the same Zoom account. Sorry about that. That is in
Hi,
fact
everybody.
Aaron, not me. There you go. And essentially, what I wanted to do, Cass reached out to Greg and Aaron and was like, I'd like some support with this thing. And we were like, awesome, we'd love to. So what we're going to do today is talk about how to deliver big ideas on a small budget for social media. All of this content has been prepared with the concept that whoever's receiving it is either doing it for themselves as a bit of DIY marketing, or you might be working for a smaller organization and you haven't got dedicated marketing resource. So we basically just wanted to make something that you could do yourselves and have fun with. So the main things that we're going to be going over today are we're going to talk a bit about social media strategy. This, for me, it's one of the biggest sections of the talk today. And part of the reason I wanted to do that is because it's often actually where you find your calm. I was talking to Cass before everyone joined today, and she was like, I find it really overwhelming trying to think of all of these things, which is a completely fair thing to say, because that's definitely how a lot of people feel when we deal with them as well. Your strategy is your source of calm. If you've got a strategy you can refer back to, you'll feel loads better about making content or whatever it might be. So we're going to start with strategy, which is basically why are you doing any of the activity you're doing? So that's really important to think about. Then what we've got is a couple of techniques for coming up with ideas. Sometimes you might be someone who's got this really clear vision and you know exactly what you want to do, but you don't actually know how to come up with ideas for that vision. That's actually a bit of a gift and a skill in and of itself. We've got two really helpful techniques that you can use in order to do that. So that's great. We're going to give you those two tools. And then what we've also got is some specific stuff for Instagram. And we've also got some specific stuff for Pinterest. Because you guys are jewelers, what we wanted to do was make sure that we gave you two of the most visual-led platforms. And also, as you'll see from those two sections, Pinterest and Instagram have got some of the biggest potential for your type of work that you do. So we thought we'd focus in on those. And then we're also going to give you some insights on how to actually measure success. So if you put all of this energy and all of this time into doing all of this marketing, are you actually getting out of it what you want? So we're going to show you how you can figure out if you've actually been successful. So hopefully all of that sounds good. What I'm also going to do at this point is just check. Oh yeah, cool. We have got someone waiting. There we go. So just to give you guys a bit of an introduction to Matchstick Creative, this bit I promise is going to be very brief. Just so you can have an understanding of why we feel we're an authority to talk about this thing. Like Cass said, we're a creative agency that's based in Liverpool, and the main areas that we focus on are content, identity, and experience. And when we say that, content is basically my bag because I'm the content director and my background's in copywriting and SEO and social media, that kind of thing. Identity is anything, you guys will be absolute pros at this. This is anything to do with visual identity and design, and also anything to do with tone of voice. So how your personality sounds basically as a brand. And then we've also got user experience, which is basically how anyone interacts with your brand. That could be in a digital space, it could be in an offline space, wherever it might be. Anytime someone interacts with your brand, they're having an experience. So that's what Greg, my business partner, that's what he does. Can I also just ask everyone to mute themselves if they haven't? Claire, I think you've just got your microphone off, if that's okay. I don't know if you can hear me. Thank you. Thanks very much. So the first thing we're going to talk about is your social media strategy. We are recording this session, so if you'd like to refer back to it, don't worry, you're going to have a recording of it. Equally, if anyone would like the slides so that they can refer back to it in a written format, also totally fine. Just reach out to us and Aaron can share them with you. So just let us know. So if you prefer to just sit and listen, or if you want to make notes as we go along, do whatever works for you. It's totally fine. So the first thing we're going to talk about is strategy. So what goes into a strategy for your social media? The first things that we always like to think about are your mission statement, your audiences, your messages, your goals, your competitor analysis, and also your approach. So that would be things like tactics, that kind of thing, what you're actually going to do as part of your strategy work. So let's do a bit of a deep dive on each of these things. The first thing that we're going to look at here is a mission statement, and mission statements can be a bit difficult to write if you're not used to them. They take a bit of getting used to, but if you're struggling with them, a really helpful template that we've used and leaned on quite a bit is this one, which is our social media is where X audience go to find Y thing so that they can achieve Z outcome. If you're able to answer those three things, you've got a pretty solid mission statement. So to give you an example, again, feel free to take a picture of your screen if you want that, but we will share everything afterwards, so don't panic if I move on too quickly here. An example of that, this one comes from our own social media strategy, just giving you guys perfectly transparent approach to this. So we've got our content is where purpose-driven people find clarity so they can have a greater impact. So the purpose-driven people is our audience, we've got them. The purpose of why we're doing anything is to help people understand. So us running sessions like this is a good example of us providing clarity to people that need it. And the reason we're doing that, so the why are we doing that at all? It's so those people can have a greater impact in their communities, on the environment, whoever, whatever it might be, which is you guys. So there's a good example of a mission statement. And the reason you want to have a mission statement in your social media strategy behind any of your work is because it effectively acts as like a North Star. If you get to the point where you're making your goals and you're like, I don't know why I'm doing this, I don't know what's going on, your mission statement basically is the thing that gives you your reassurance. And it's like, oh yeah, that's why I'm doing it. That's what this is about. So once you've got your mission statement in place, what you also need to think about are your audiences. So audiences, the main questions that you need to answer around audiences are, who are we trying to attract? What motivates them is really important. Why should they care about our product? Where do they spend time? And who influences them? And when I say the word influence there, I don't mean influencer in the sort of Instagram-centric way of someone posing on a beach somewhere saying that they're an essential worker. I don't know if that annoyed anyone else this week. It really annoyed me. So effectively, it's not that. That's not the version of an influencer we're thinking of. Someone who influences your audience could be someone like their own mother, who might have a big say over their purchase decisions. It could be something like their partner. It could be someone who's once removed from their circle of friends, so they have actually quite a bit of influence over them. Think of any relationship to your audience that could have a sway over how they spend their money. That's quite a helpful way of thinking about it. So to give you an example of this, here we've got ethical Estelle, and we're going to use Estelle as an example throughout this talk today. We're going to come back to her a few times, but this is a good example of Estelle. So Estelle is 35, she's a city dweller with a bit of disposable income, she's got a child-free home, and she likes to take part in community action groups. Estelle sounds like someone I'd like to be mates with, which is what I wrote her. What does Estelle want? She wants to buy from ethical companies, that's a really big driver for her. She wants a one-off design with a bit of a story behind it, because she likes her pieces to feel unique to her. And she'll also share her purchases on Instagram because that reflects the kind of value she has and the kind of lifestyle she has. So that gives us quite a lot to go on for our strategy, for us to know what to do with her. So there's Estelle. And then what we want to do is make sure that we've got some goals that are really measurable and easy to understand. And in order to do that, we're going to do something called SMART goals. SMART goals are not an original concept. I in no way have ownership over this idea. It's something that's been around for eons in marketing. However, there's a reason it's lasted, because they're actually super useful. And if anything's going to bring you clarity and give you a feeling of calm when it comes to your marketing, it's your SMART goals. They're difficult to write, but actually they're the thing that give you the most value out of your strategy. So a SMART goal basically is something that's specific, measurable, achievable, relevant, and timely. And I've got an example here so you know what I mean. So an example SMART goal, we're trying to attract ethical Estelle. What are we doing to attract her? We want to increase engagement, so that's things like likes and comments, on our Instagram post by 20% by the end of Q1. We know that when we interact with customers authentically on social media, they're more likely to convert into repeat customers. Repeat customers are really important to us because not only are they going to be more loyal to our brand, it means more money. More money's good. So there's a good example of a SMART goal. It's really specific. We're basically trying to get more engagement. That's important. It's measurable. We know we're going for 20%. So when I go to do my reporting at the end of all of this activity, it has to meet that number. And if it doesn't meet that number or it exceeds it, then we've learned something else as well. And I also know when I'm doing it for. So I'm doing it for the end of Q1. So that means I've got 3 months to reach my goal. That's good. I understand what I need to do. So SMART goals are a good thing to think about. If you're feeling panicky, whenever we make strategies, generally speaking, we wouldn't do more than 3 or 4 SMART goals. You don't need loads of them. You don't need a lot of them at all. I would actually recommend less is more. Don't try to do everything. Try to do a few things really well. Particularly if you're a one-person band and you haven't got a lot of resource, do what's achievable and relevant to you as well as to your business. Don't try and put a load of pressure on yourself because it won't work and then you'll feel bad, which is rubbish. So from your SMART goals, now we understand who our audience is. What we now need to understand is what we're going to say to that audience. What are they going to engage with? So when we think of messaging, what we're thinking about here is what themes will drive our messaging? How do we create standout? And where will our messaging have the most impact? So let's go back to our example for ethical Estelle. We're trying to get Estelle, we want her to engage with our content, and we want her to understand that we are ethical and sustainable. So just a bit of an elaboration on that. Our jewellery treats people fairly at every touch point. We're fair trade, environmentally friendly, and are driven by a greater purpose than profit. So there's lots of, just gonna let that person in. There's lots of stuff there that if you give that to a copywriter, or if you sit down and think, okay, what are all the different types of content I can make that helps reinforce that message? I know that one of the main things I want people to walk away from my jewellery brand is them thinking I'm ethical and sustainable as a company. That's really important. So that's a good example of a messaging thing. And again, when we're creating these for our strategies, we wouldn't do more than 3 or 4. You don't want loads of different messaging things because it really reduces the amount of clarity you've got in your strategy. So just go for 3 core messages you're going after and really stick to them. There are lots of ways to iterate and get across those messages, but you don't need lots of them. Again, less is more. So the next thing that's really helpful for your strategy is thinking about what everyone else is doing. So there'll be lots of people that you'll consider collaborators, people that you'll consider competitors as well. There's lots of things you can learn from them. So when you're looking at your competitor analysis, switch into analysis and stalking mode, as we do when we're doing it, and have a think about who is similar to us and what are they doing? What can we learn from them? What data can we gather? And we've got some tools we can tell you about there. Oh, we've got someone else. And how do we do it? How do we do it better or differently? That's really important. You don't just want to see what your competitor or collaborators are doing. You want to go a step beyond that, and you want to do something that's a bit more exciting. So let's look at an example. So for your own strategy, what I'd recommend that you guys do is choose 3 competitors. Again, you don't need loads. You just need enough for you to get an understanding of the field and who's like you. Then you can lean on third-party software, like there's a tool called Follow a Wonk, which will provide a link to everyone who turns up today. We'll send you an email afterwards with some key points from it. We'll give you links to these tools as well, so don't worry about writing it down. And also SparkToro. Those 2 tools, there's both free versions of them and really cheap versions of them that are like 30 or 50 bucks a month. They're not a huge amount at all. And basically, you want to be able to use those tools to gather some data on what other people like you are doing, and you want to figure out how you can zag when they zig. I hate that expression, it gets used in marketing all the time, but actually it's quite helpful to think about because it basically says, you're doing this, I should be doing this. So just have a think about that. Okay, and then what we've got here is a good example of the kind of things that we would put into a competitor analysis. So Sour Cherry are a Manchester-based jewellery brand that I love. I'm 100% their target audience for this, so I'm fully aware of my own bias in this analysis. But these guys, the kind of things that we would think about when we're sort of putting together a competitor analysis for a client. First of all, I can tell if you go into their feed and have a look at Sour Cherry, they've got very consistent brand application. So they've got a colour theme they stick to, they've got a particular style of photography they stick to. So that's been really consistent throughout all of it. That to me as a consumer, 1, makes me like looking at the feed because I like looking at pretty things. It's that superficial sometimes. And 2, it tells me that they've actually put some thought into it, which makes me trust them. Brand is a lot of the time to do with trust. This particular post has got a bit of service focus in it. So what they're actually saying here, as nice as that picture is, and it's kind of distracting as I'm just looking at the cute bulldogs, What they're actually saying is we're a bit low on stock at the moment. Can you please bear with us because we're struggling to get hold of supplies like a lot of people have during COVID. So that's helpful. It's helpful information that's sort of dressed up in a way that's engaging for me. The other thing I think about is from their point of view, they could have framed this post in quite a few ways, but they've decided to be quite transparent about what's going on in their company, which to me immediately makes me trust them and like them, because I like companies that tell me when things go wrong. A lot of the time, a lot of us do, because it makes you think, well, they've messed up, but they've recognized they've messed up, or they know that they're struggling with something. It may be something completely out of their control. I appreciate them letting me know. So transparent comms usually goes down pretty well. And also, it's got a really clear call to action and upsell. So even though this post is actually to do with service and it's like there's a bit of a disruption, but we got this other stuff that you want to know about, come have a look at this. The call to action is actually to do with going and buying a different product. Like, awesome. They've achieved so many things in this post, and that's just like really good example of best practice. So that's the kind of stuff when you guys are going out and looking at your competitors that you can think about, and the kind of like sort of information that you can gather whilst you're doing it. So now that we've done some analysis and we've understood what our goals are, we know who we're talking to, the next most important thing is approach. So now we've got all this information, what are we going to do with it? And that's basically called approach and tactics. And the main questions you should be asking yourself here are, what tactics can we employ to help us land our messaging with our audiences? Because your audiences should always be at the core of everything you're doing. Does our approach ultimately answer our mission statement and meet our goals? That's the most important question you can ask yourself during the strategy phase. If you're, like I said at the beginning, if you're thinking about doing a load of Facebook posts when you've identified none of your target audiences are on Facebook, why are you doing it? Just don't. Just give yourself a break and don't even try to do that. Think about where your audience is, where the messaging will land, and if it meets the goals you've set yourself. Because it could be that if you're currently posting 3 times a day, but that's not actually reaping any reward for you, you might as well just stop doing it. You might as well try a different tactic. Don't put a load of pressure on yourself that you can't reach. Do something that's attainable for you. And also, does our approach match our resources? This is a really important one. A lot of the time we'll have people that will come to us and be like, we'd like something absurd, like a Channel 4 spot, but we've got a spend of 800 quid. And I'm like, how do you think that's happening? That doesn't in any way meet your SMART goals. So just try to be realistic about what you've got, your own resources, and how you can utilize them best. That's quite a helpful thing to think about. And that again, that for me gives me a lot of calm. That makes me feel a lot calmer because I'm like, I can't do it because we haven't got the resource, so I can just immediately dismiss it. That's actually quite a good thing. I can focus on this other stuff that makes me feel better, which is good. And also, one really important thing to think about is if you were to write your idea down or if you were to explain it to someone else, would they understand it? It's really important when you're making a strategy, particularly if you've got other people involved in your strategy, that they understand the purpose of the activity you're doing and they understand what they need to do to deliver it. This is mainly a point I raise because I've usually been on the receiving end of confusing strategies as a copywriter, and I'm like, what do you want me to do? I don't really get it. The other person needs to understand what your tactic is, because then it will clearly come out on your channels effectively as well. So what I'd like to do now is take a breath from talking, because I feel like I've done a lot of talking, and I just want everyone to take a moment to reflect, and we can also get a bit of a dialogue going in the chat box, because I know Aaron's monitoring it for us at the moment. Out of everything you've just learned, what's the thing that stuck with you? And I'm just going to put a timer on for a minute, literally just a sec, and you guys can have a think about, out of all that information from the strategy section, what stuck with you. Feel free to either say it verbally, feel free just to speak up if you don't want to write, or if you can, write it down in the chat box and Aaron can read it out for you. So I will set a timer for a minute and then we'll reconvene and see what people say. So your minute starts now. Got 30 seconds left. to gather your thoughts. I can see we've got some stuff coming through in the chat, which is good. Okay, let's have a look. Got 10 seconds to gather your thoughts. Okay, so Aaron, can you tell us what some people have said in the chat?
Hey, yes, I can. So Monique said, how do we find out where our audience is spending their time and which social media platform they're using?
Yep, that's a good one. And those tools we suggested there can help you with that, Monique. So Spark Toro is a really good one to help you with that, as is Follower Wonk. So we'll share links to that after the talk. So good question, yeah.
Chris said smart goals, put simply.
Good, good. I'm glad SMART goals are stuck with someone. They're really useful.
Maze said just the fact that there can be a clear strategy for this is news to me.
Yeah, yes, it's not something people are familiar with unless you've worked in marketing, so that's completely fair feedback. So yes, good. I'm glad that's helped.
Chris also said smart goals. Message, Malika, sorry, apologies if I pronounced that wrong, said message. I need to grasp what my message is and what I want to convey.
Nice. Yeah, that's all great. Does anyone want to say anything verbally? I don't want you to feel like you've got to write it down if you don't want to. Does anyone have anything they'd like to add to that at all? Or you can all be quiet and I can carry on. It's up to you. Okay, we'll crack on because I'm aware of the time. Cool. Thank you for those responses in the chat. We appreciate it. So the next thing we're going to look at with this beautiful picture of Aaron that I don't think he was aware was in this presentation is two different concepts for coming up with ideas. So I won't go into detail on these, but when we share the slides afterwards, they'll also be on the blog post that we'll upload to our site in a sec, guys. There's two different things that we do when we're doing workshops with everyone. One of them is called brainwriting and the other one's called sketchnoting. Brainwriting basically is a way for you to create hundreds of ideas in about 30 minutes. It's really helpful, particularly if you're trying to come up with stuff for social media, because the volume of content you need is so huge, particularly for something like Instagram or Pinterest. Pinterest has got a slightly longer burn on it. Instagram's probably slightly shorter lifespan, so really helpful. When we share the slides, there's a link on that you can just click on and you can go and see how you can do brainwriting. It's basically like crowdsourcing ideas. So if you get like 2 or 3 people in the room with you, you can come up with like 300 ideas in 30 minutes, which is really helpful. And it's something we do when we work with people. The other example we've got there is sketchnoting, which we literally had a whole workshop on. We had a professional sketchnoter come in and teach us how to do this. It's so much fun. But essentially, sketchnoting is doodling your ideas instead of writing them. And it sounds like a stupid thing to do because you're like, I could just write down what you're saying. Actually, you'll find that you'll retain information better if you do it as a sketch. And also, if you're stuck, so say if you're sat down and you're like, right, I've got 30 minutes here, I'm going to come up with some ideas for some Instagram content for my channel. You can do sketchnoting instead, and it unlocks the way your brain thinks about the problem. It makes you approach it completely differently. So if you're writing it down as a word person, I naturally want to write everything down because I'm very language driven. But if you're a visual person, sketchnoting is massively helpful, and it also helps you think slightly differently. So I don't know if anyone here has done sketchnoting before, but I highly recommend it. So we've got 2 links there that you can click on afterwards, but we'll leave that there for now. But they're really good for coming up with ideas. So the next thing we're going to have a look at, importantly, are some Instagram tactics. I had a look at some of you guys before because I saw that you'd followed us on Instagram. Thank you. We very much appreciate it. And I can see that some of you are already following some of these tactics, which is great to see. So what I wanted to do was start with some fundamentals to do with Instagram. So some really fundamental stuff that anyone can do, which is really easy to achieve. Make sure you use highlights on your Instagram page for product, brand, and value storytelling. So I think particularly if you're an e-commerce business, or if you're someone who's selling lots and lots of products at high volume, you usually have a very high focus on product. It doesn't necessarily mean that your only thing that you should be talking about is products. Like we said in the messaging before, say if you're an ethically sourced jewellery brand, a lot of your content could just be to do with how you deal with the supply chain, how you deal with people that you interact with, your approach to dealing with customers. All of that helps to sell you and your services without it only being about product, which is useful to think about. And also your values. Like everyone here has their own personal values. What are the values of your brand? Have a think about that and sit down and define that for yourself so it's easier for you to make content for Instagram. The next one, which I can say quite a few of you are doing in spades already, is consistent branding and color scheme. So if you, particularly for Instagram, this is super important. It's less important for Pinterest because of how pins behave in their algorithm. But for Instagram, there's quite a few people I follow that have got a very restricted color palette. So a lot of them, for example, like Sour Cherry, who I used before, they've got quite a pastel based color palette. So most of their posts will feature like millennial pink, sky blue, lemon yellow. There's like quite a few of those colors. They don't really stray from it, so you won't see anything else appearing on there that's not to do with that. It's really useful, and it's surprisingly difficult to stick to unless you do a professional shoot of your products or you have a particular color palette that you stick to. Photography is so important for Instagram, and slightly less so than for Pinterest. But for Instagram, you just have to have good photography. You don't have to spend a lot on it at all. You can teach yourself some fundamentals of photography and doing brand photography. We'll follow up with that actually. There's probably some resources we can find on that for you. But consistent brand and color scheme is really important. Something called hashtag buckets, which I always feel like is a really strange use of that word, but we'll talk through that in a second so that you can match your brand messaging to your strategy. Authenticity is really key to engage people and keep them loyal. Like I said before, there may be some brands that you interact with that recognize some of the mistakes they make, and they'll be like, so sorry, that wasn't very us, we didn't mean to do that, and they'll follow up with a nice bit of customer service. Also, just recognizing the situation we're all in right now. We're in a third national lockdown in the space of like 13 months. It's absurd. Just acknowledge it and know that it's having an impact on your business. It's impacting everyone, so that's completely fair enough. So let's look at hashtag buckets and this absurd terminology that I came across from someone else. So a hashtag bucket is, you basically think of like 5 to 8 content themes. So if we think back to Ethical Estelle, there's some main messages that she was thinking about there, one of which, for example, will be ethical and sustainable. And what you want to do is create 5 to 8 headlines. So one of them might be ethical business and sustainability. That could be one of them. Another one could be like jewellery for millennials. You could have a particular audience that you're going after, for example. Or it could be like Gen Z trends. Then what you want to do, because you've got those main headlines, those main buckets, you basically want to research about 20 to 30 hashtags that fall within those buckets. And what's really great is if you're the person who's managing your channels, you can copy and paste, which saves you a lot of time, because there'll be some posts that you do that you can just be like, that's definitely to do with our ethics and sustainability as a company. I can reuse those hashtags and appear in those conversations because that feels relevant. So the example I've got here is ethical and sustainable, and it's hashtag fair trade, hashtag sustainable fashion. They're both relevant. They're quite high volume ones. You could probably find more niche ones. If you're looking, again, we'll follow up with this, but if you're looking for a way to identify good hashtags, you can either use the website Hashtagify, or I think there's another one that's literally called something like really good hashtags, but I can't remember, or best hashtag. We'll follow up with that so you guys can have a look at it. But there's resources you can use that are free that you can just research those things. But hashtag buckets are super helpful because it saves you time, which I'm always in favor of. Okay, so the next thing I wanted to talk about was a specific thing, which is called retargeting ads. Retargeting basically is advertising that specifically targets website visitors who leave without making a purchase. Those people could be people that have something in their shopping cart and then they leave before paying. So that's called shopping cart abandonment. That could be what they're doing. Equally, they could be someone that's just turned up on your website and been like, cool, that's what you're about, and then left and done nothing else. As long as they've landed on your website, you can retarget them with an advert about your brand. And depending on your product and audience, cost acquisition per ad can be lower than other platforms, particularly on Instagram. It's been basically redesigned alongside Facebook to become an advertising platform. So if you spend a tiny bit of money, you really don't have to spend that much, to be honest. So if you've got like an ad spend of 100 quid a month or whatever you're comfortable spending, you can spend that and still get a return on your money. So it's something that's worth thinking about. And my wonderful assistant, Aaron, has created an example here for you guys to look at. So This is from Nike, which is one of his favorite brands of all time. Aaron's even appeared in a Nike advert at one point. Fun fact for you there about Aaron. And basically what this teaches us is you can show your audience products they've viewed on your website. So say if someone goes to a particular page and they're like, I really want that Nike's kid shoe. Basically, you can take that and put it into your retargeting advert. So they're seeing a specific thing, so it feels more relevant to them. You can also reach users that aren't following you already, because that person who looks at that ad might interact with it, and that means it will appear in someone else's feed. And also you can purchase directly from Instagram. They've completely changed it so it's become a shopping and an advertising platform. So if you've got enough followers, you are able to implement shopping functionality as well. So there's a nice example of a retargeting ad. And then the other tactic I wanted to talk about here with you guys is a really cheap one, i.e. completely free, and also achieves so many things at once, which is something called user-generated content, or UGC is often what it gets shortened to. And essentially that's authentic content created by fans of your page, and you can incentivize people through a competition or giveaway to come up with this stuff, and it helps showcase your product in the real world. So perhaps you guys have got a particular piece of jewellery that's been shipped to someone. When that jewellery lands with them, is there anything in the box or anything you send with them in the packet that says, can you share this on Instagram? Can you do this thing for us? If you do, you'll be in the chance with getting 10% off next time. Are there any incentives you can do that encourages people to create content on your behalf? One, it saves you time again, which I'm a big fan of. I love saving time as a content manager. And also it means that it's giving credibility and it makes people feel connected with your brand, because there's a real person using it. It's not you, the marketer, it's not you, the founder, it's the person who's like them. So that's great. So is there any way we can get them to do that? My dog's about to shake, I think, so you may hear him. There he is. And yeah, it gives you content without any effort. So here's an example from Coca-Cola that Aaron sourced for us. This is quite a nice one. And again, it shows the product in the real world. It shows it's authentic and it's been created by fans. This is when they did that absolutely incredible campaign where they named all of their bottles, and they put a load of people, because they knew as soon as someone saw their name on something, they were going to take a picture with it, regardless of it being as something as banal as a Coca-Cola bottle. They were suddenly like, oh, it's got my name on it, I'll take a picture because it's me. People are insane. And that's literally what everyone did. So that's a really, really clever tactic, a really good strategy tactic. It also gave them an incentive for sharing, and it acts as an endorsement and testimonial. So it hits all of those user-generated content metrics. So quite a useful thing to think about there. If Coca-Cola can do it, you can do it. That's a free idea that you can nick from Coca-Cola. Okay, so the next thing we're going to look at is Pinterest. And I just wanted to start Pinterest. I don't know how familiar people are with Pinterest. I'm personally a big pinner because I'm 100% their demographic, as we'll see in a minute. I don't know if anyone uses this as part of their strategy now, but the lifespan of a pin is really long. It's like months, whereas the lifespan of a tweet is like 30 seconds. Your tweet will live for about a minute or two, and then it will just disappear. It just gets lost in the amount of content that's being displayed. A pin can last for up to like 3 or 4 months, and people will keep clicking on it. They'll keep interacting with it. It will keep getting shared if it gets pinned to a board. So in terms of longevity with your strategy, Pinterest has huge potential. So I'd really consider it. So let's look at some helpful statistics. First of all, 71% of global Pinterest users are women. This is huge because it's a female-dominated platform that's way more swayed towards women than any other platform is. And women have all of the purchasing power. So if you're trying to get women with your jewellery, you need to be on Pinterest, basically. 52% of Pinterest users spend, this is from an American site called Sprout Social, spend $500 or more on beauty products within 6 months. So not only does it mean that you've got a really captive audience, as long as you put good imagery out and do good SEO on it, which we'll talk about in a minute, they're also high spenders. So if you've got the audience there and you've got the purchase decision maker and they're going to spend a lot, it's common sense that you should be on there. And also, a miraculous statistic, over half of the millennial population use Pinterest. If your particular jewellery brand wants to engage with women like me, people roughly my age, say that is one of your audiences, it might not be. Say it is, Pinterest is where we are. That's certainly where I spend time with a glass of red on a Friday. I don't know about anyone else, it's definitely me. Pinterest is a good way to plan for your house or to plan your fashion or plan your jewellery. It's a good thing to think about. So, and also 40% of the users log on to shop. So you've got a captive audience, you've got the purchase decision via there, you've got high spend, and they're there to shop. So even more so than Instagram, they're ready to buy, which is really important for you as product sellers. So some really fundamentals of Pinterest, similar to what we said with Instagram. You need consistent branding and color scheme. It's not as important as it is on Instagram because people don't view feeds the way they do on Instagram and Pinterest. However, if you're able to create a consistent brand identity, that always helps, regardless of what platform you're on. You can do something really helpful, which is branding your board covers, and you can set specific pictures. So say if you've got a beautiful suite of photography done as a favor from someone, or you've done it yourself, perhaps you're an amazing photographer, you can reuse that and repurpose it everywhere. A really good place to do that is on Pinterest boards. You can use Canva. I don't know if anyone here has ever heard of the tool Canva, but again, we'll follow up with that. It's really good because it's basically graphic design for people with no budget. And they've got loads of Pinterest templates you can use. So you don't even need to think about the type of template you're making. They're already there for you. And it's free. You can use a free version of Canva. You can create Pinterest specific graphics. Another really great thing about Pinterest is the amount of space you can take up. So on Instagram, everyone's got the little square. On Twitter, it kind of depends if you're doing it with a link or whatever. Pinterest, the graphics can be like half a screen. They're just huge. You can take up so much space on someone's screen. It's like a massive ad space for your business, which is really great. And also, it's one of the most used visual search engines. So there's lots of stuff that you can do to optimize your posts, which is what we're going to look at now, to help with search queries. So some fundamental stuff there. So what I wanted to talk about first was something called lead magnets. Don't know if anyone's heard of this phrase before, but essentially that is a piece of content that's geared towards gathering data. So that could be something like you really want to get people's emails so that you can follow up with them after they left your website, after they've made a purchase with you, and be like, these are our new products. This is some of the stuff our company's doing. Continued messaging is important, which is why social media plays such an influential role, which is why email can play such an influential role. It has a tangible value to the person downloading it. So depending on what you decide to make, which I'll show you an example of in a minute, the person who's downloading it has to understand it's going to add value to their life somehow. And also it's a chance for you to keep marketing to them and to follow up afterwards, which is great. We want to keep the conversation going with them. So let's look at an example for ethical Estelle again. She's popped back up. So for Estelle, what we thought would be helpful was the ethical jewellery checklist. So a one-sheet download that gives practical hands-on advice for knowing if a jeweler is ethical and fair trade. This is a really helpful tool, one, because it's really easy to download. It's definitely got value to Estelle because it's really important to her that she understands how ethically traded a company is. It really highlights her brand values. I get that, that this company understands what they stand for, and that engages me. It gives huge value to the person downloading it, and it gives a chance to continue the conversation afterwards. So have a little think about lead magnets. And because of the way links work on Pinterest, if you create a pin, unlike Instagram where you only get one link, or you have to use that link as a link tree where you can put several links, Pinterest, you get multiple links, and all of those links are likely to be engaged with compared to other platforms. So that's really helpful. So they're quite powerful links on Pinterest. So give them something to download, which is great. And it also gives them a reason to go to your website. And that means they'll be able to look at your products, which is great. Okay. And the only other thing I wanted to talk about with Pinterest was search optimization. So some of you, I'm not sure how familiar you are with it, but there's another concept in marketing called SEO, which is search engine optimization. And normally when we talk about search engine optimization, we're talking about it for Google search engine organic search. So say if you were like ethical jewellery trader London, you'd want to appear for that. There's lots of things you can do to your website to help you appear for that term. That's Google optimization. You can do the same thing for Pinterest. Pinterest acts in a similar way. It's a visual search engine instead of it being an everything search engine like Google is. So when you're writing your Pinterest post, the thing that's important to bear in mind is for the name of your post, you get 65 characters. For your bio, you get 160 characters, and that's a chance for you to target keywords. You can target keywords, which I'll talk about in a minute, in pins, and you can also target keywords in board descriptions. So they're quite powerful. There's quite a lot of optimization opportunities in Pinterest for you to use. So let's look at some keyword research tips. When you're thinking about keywords for your products, the main questions you want to ask yourself are, what might someone search for to find my product? So literally think, if someone was going to type this into a search engine, imagine you're the user, imagine you're the person buying, be like, I would probably search for malachite necklace, solid gold. That's probably something you might put in if you were thinking that specifically. Or you might be thinking about jewellery as a gift for a friend, that kind of thing. They're all search terms. They're keywords that you can optimize your content for. And what you always want to do is try and strike a balance between the brand tone of voice, so how you're trying to get across your personality, and optimization, as a bit of a balancing act, because sometimes you'll want to veer towards optimization and sometimes you want to veer towards brand tone of voice. That's kind of your call there. And then also, what keywords are my competitors using that I can capitalize on? So someone else will have done what you've done before, they just haven't done it in your unique way, but there's loads of stuff we can learn from them. So again, like our competitor analysis in the strategy session, equally, you can do the same thing when you're looking at keywords, and you can do some competitor analysis for keywords and have a look at what they're doing and see if you can steal any of their tactics. Okay, so here's another example. We've got Lucy Williams square malachite gold necklace, hence my example before. So we've got really engaging lifestyle imagery being used here. That sort of, clearly I've chosen examples that speak to me. There's a huge amount of bias in this presentation, but that's basically what we're saying. And if I see that, the thing I'll see in the feed on Pinterest when I search for something is that image is engaging to me, so I'll probably click on it. Then when I click on it, I get all this other information. A lot of it's been optimized for keywords. So we've got malachite gold necklace, that would be a keyword. We've also got down here, cut malachite gemstone set in 18 karat gold. Oh, we've got some more people turning up. Contains a natural gemstone, that could also be a keyword. So there's quite a few different things going on there that indicates to me that they've optimized this post. And also it's got a pretty detailed product description. I'd say this is probably a bit too detailed. They've probably just taken the product description from the website and put it into their Pinterest pin, but it's worked. It's got them a lot of exposure, so that's a good thing to think about. If there's any opportunity when you're making your content for your social channels to duplicate efforts without it feeling inauthentic, I'd highly recommend it. Save yourself time as much as you can. So if you've got copy that you've used on your website and it's appropriate for Pinterest, just repurpose it and make it appropriate to the platform. Okay, and then the final section we're going to look at is measuring success. So we've set all our goals out, we've done some activity, we've rolled some stuff out on our channels, now we want to know if it's worked. So ultimately, did we meet the goals we set out in our strategy? What can we do to iterate and improve for next time? And what tools can we use to help us achieve deeper insights? The thing I'd want to stress probably most on this slide is the second point. If it didn't work, honestly, it's not the end of the world. There's a lot of stuff you do in marketing that's a bit of experimentation. So don't think because you set yourself a goal in the strategy section that you're like, well, we said we were going to do that and we didn't. Isn't that a huge disappointment? It's not about that. It's just knowing that your assumption was wrong, and then you can iterate on that based on the information you've got because you had something to measure. If you didn't have anything to measure, you wouldn't know if it was a success or not anyway. So don't see it as success and failure, see it as success or iterate. That's what we tend to do. And finally, here are some helpful tools. Again, we'll follow up with this in the email afterwards, so don't feel you have to note all this down. SparkToro is a really useful tool for audience research and for finding things like good press sources. So if you recognise in your strategy, we really need to get press mentions, that's really important to us. You can go into SparkToro and find the ones that are appropriate to the type of brand you are. If you're finding you're spending loads of time scheduling your content, you can use a tool like Buffer. There's a free version of Buffer that anyone can have access to. That's really good. If you've got a bit more money, you could use Sprout Social, which is what we use. It's a bit pricey, so I'd probably start with Buffer. That's quite a good one to do as an entry point. Follower Wonk is the one that I used before for helping you to grow your audience and recognizing the type of followers your competitors have got. And then finally, you've also got Google Analytics. You can have a look at your referral traffic in Google Analytics, which is code associated to your e-commerce site. and you can have a look through that and you can see if your social efforts have had an impact there. So those are the main points for measuring. It's very tool-led because to go into the depth that you need for measuring is huge. So I've just kept that very surface level there so you know where to go and have a bit of a look afterwards. Now you'll be happy to know we've got time for Q&A. I've managed to do that bang on 10 too. I'm quite proud of that. Brilliant. Has anyone got any questions? You can either post them in the chat and Aaron can let me know what you said, or you can just speak up now. Feel free to say something. It's totally fine.
I have something to say.
Go on.
It's Kassandra, by the way, if everyone can't see me. You know, I really find hard. I make all this jewelry for people, right? And they won't do the photo or the video. You know how I have to, and I can't always give free jewelry, and it's because of my price points, and it's really upsetting because I have made a lot of engagement rings for people, and you know what I hate? Sorry, this is a bit of a moan and a question. When they just put their finger in, and I'm just like, you spent X amount of money on this engagement ring. No one's going to believe me unless they really trust me. It could have been anyone's finger. I need the bride and I need this. And it's like, they don't see the value. I bet it was like do something, which they, you know, the value of something. They'll write me a written testimonial. Yeah. And they're just, I don't know what basically what I'm asking you. What can I give them apart from jewelry? I don't know how to bribe them for them to say and repurpose content. It is like dragging teeth. They don't want to do it. They will do everything but give me a picture of them saying that they've got my jewelry, and it's but they'll do it for other brands.
That's a really good question, because it's like, how do you incentivize people to do what you need them to do as the business owner or as the marketer? The answer is it's really bloody hard. And one of the things that I would suggest is try not to give product away, because not only does that like devalue the thing you've done, which is rubbish, it's also suggesting that that's like the first thing you'd go to. What I'd probably suggest instead is like, I would change the micro copy. So the words that you send or the requests that you put in, I would change it so that it becomes about supporting a small business, or it becomes about an incentive they can get. So for example, referral incentives work really well, because it's like, if you tell a friend about us, we'll give both of you 50% off your next purchase, or whatever is achievable for your margins. I would prefer to do something like that, because you're getting two things out of it. You're building a relationship and you're getting them to refer you to someone else, rather than giving stuff away, because it's like really devaluing the craft you've put in. So I'd be more keen to like do a referral incentive, or I would try and change the story around why you're asking them to do it and the impact it has on your business in a positive way. So maybe just try a bit of like emotive storytelling there and be like, if you do that, you're really helping my small business and it's a really tough time. And if you can do it, that's great. Because that would work on me. I'd be like, yeah, I'll take a picture for you. And I'd go take a picture. But it may not strike with everyone. Depends who it is you're talking to. But good question. Thanks, Cass. Does anyone else got any questions? Don't be shy. We won't bite your head off.
Okay, I have another quick question. Maybe
this
is all about me. So since you're here, because I know how like digital agency would charge like X amount £100 an hour. So I'm just trying to get what I can. Okay. Thank you. I was going to say, so once I do the strategy, because that's what I'm trying to work on now. How long do I wait? Because it can be a bit of like a rabbit hole. Like, oh my God, this post gone up. This doesn't. And it's not always good. I can't always see the patterns.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? I can't always see, okay, this really works well. It could work well last month, but this month it doesn't do. I'm looking at my copy and it always seems like I'm always changing, and it's just like I can't keep up. I don't know, and my following hasn't really grown. So I don't know. I feel like I'm a bit like, I'm monitoring, but I don't know how long to monitor for.
Yeah.
And there's no actually monetary value coming. There's no sales. And I feel like the only time when I get probably sales is when I've put into some PR, like press or something.
Yeah.
But not from social media, because I really want to be direct to consumer.
Yeah, there's a couple of good points in there. The first one is around how long do I monitor for? That's a really good question, and it depends on the SMART goals you've set yourself at the beginning of your strategy. But generally speaking, you don't want to be too reactive because you won't have enough data to look at to understand, to make an informed decision. So generally speaking, when we're running a campaign, the minimum we would run a campaign is like a fortnight. So say if you've done 2 weeks worth of a strategy or an approach, a particular tactic, I wouldn't really do anything to change it for a fortnight. And you can do that as like a really sort of like micro sprint test of your assumptions. And then from that, you might want to then go on to do something different. But definitely don't do it on like a daily basis because you'll drive yourself insane. There's not enough data there for you to make an informed decision. So for a minimum, I'd say 2 weeks. Equally, you could be doing things for like a month and you'd get quite a bit more insight. That question about converting people from social media to becoming a purchaser is a huge question, and it's one that we get asked loads. It massively depends on who you're targeting your messaging towards. So what I'd think about there with your strategy is like, who are the audiences and what's their behavior? The more insights you can gather on their behavior, the more helpful that is, and you'll be able to have a better guess at how to get them to convert. I can't answer that for you now because I'm not sure who your audiences are, but I would do proper research on your audiences and who you're trying to buy your product, and then you might be able to answer that question better. That thing you were saying about press gets us better return to actually convert to sales, that informs your strategy. Your social media may not be for that purpose. Your social media might be to do with brand values and awareness, but you're not using it to generate sales. And in that case, you change the goals associated to what your content's doing. It could also change drastically how often you post, because you're like, if it's not going to convert to a sale, I need to spend less time on it, and I actually need to spend more time on press, and that will get me a better return. Great, do that. That works for your business at the moment. It could be that changes. But if you've noticed you got a better return on press, do press, is what I'd say. Do more of it. So yeah, another good question. Thanks, Cass.
There's a couple in the chat.
Go ahead.
One from Chris saying, how do you figure out who your competitors actually are? Because the way she's designing at the minute, she's struggling to find out who her competitors are, basically.
That's also a very good question. Sometimes if you've got someone that works in a very like niche area, it's really not obvious who their competitors are and how on earth you would do research around it. If you want to follow up with us after this and send us a link to your profiles, we could probably give you a bit of insight on that. But if you're not sure who your competitors are, what I would probably do is make a few assumptions and test them. So think about your brand values to begin with and be like, what do we stand for? What do we want people to walk away thinking about us as a brand? Then try and identify brands that match to those values. Because say, for example, you're like, the thing we really care about is global domination. We want to be a global brand at scale. There's lessons you can learn from Coca-Cola. There's lessons you can learn from Innocent Smoothies, who are now part of Coca-Cola. So even though they may not be in your sector or a direct competitor, there's still stuff you can learn from brands that have shared values to you, and you can apply those tactics to your own brand and your own approach. So it may not be directly correlated, or it might be when you're first looking at it, you're not sure, and then it may become more apparent as you do it, if that makes sense. But if you want to follow up with us, you've got my email there on the screen. Let us know and we can help you out with that a little bit.
We've got another question in the chat from Claire saying, sorry, this may be a silly question, but when you post pins on interest, do you have to make the text engaging like you would on Instagram or Facebook?
Yeah, that's a really good question. That's not stupid at all. I think it links back to the optimization point in my presentation, where you're kind of striking a bit of a balance between the right keywords and also your brand positioning, so your own brand tone of voice. The text is important because the text, another thing to think about is accessibility. Say if someone's using Pinterest and they're using a screen reader and they can't see your image at all, the text is the only thing that they're going to have read to them. So that means always think about that when you're thinking of making copy, because that's the thing the screen reader actually scans on the page. So if you also want to be an accessible brand, it's important to think about stuff like that. Equally, much to the bemoaning of many copywriters across the land, copy is important, and it's often pushed down on priority compared to visual graphics because we're a very visual society at the moment. copy is important. It plays a very influential role in how people see your brand. So yes, definitely pay attention to the copy on your Pinterest. That's a really good question. Any other questions?
Hi, I've got 2 questions.
Yeah.
One is, could you give some tips on paid adverts? I'm always uncertain whether I should get people to follow my accounts and then let them get an understanding of my brand and learn about me, and then hopefully they'll go onto my website, or have them go straight directly to the website. Do you have any tips on that?
That's a good question. And I'm going to answer it honestly. I'm not a paid expert, which is why there's not a lot of paid information in that talk, but we know people who are paid experts. So I can refer you to someone who is. However, that question about should I be encouraging a follow, because basically it's like, what kind of paid activity are you doing? Are you doing like a paid promotion on a product, or are you doing like a follow promotion where it's like, come follow our page? So my response is that goes back to your strategic thinking. Is our goal that we want more followers because we have an assumption, or we know that that will convert sales, or we know it's important for people to know more about our brand? So that means you would run a follow campaign. You've answered your question there. If you're trying to drive sales on a particular product, do a promoted post on a particular product, and you can just drive them straight to the webpage so they buy it. So that's a really good example of why your goals are important, because in order to answer that question, you have to have done that thinking first. So I'd go back to there, go back to your fundamentals, and then you'll know what activity to do. Does that help?
Very much so.
Yeah.
And the second question is, once I've collected the data, I never know what to do with it. Like I can understand, okay, someone's in France, I can maybe look at more French people to target, but other than that, I don't know what to do with the data that's been collected.
That's a really good question, and it's really difficult to answer because it depends what the data is saying. So my response would be, we'll follow up with a couple of posts from a couple of trusted sources we've got in our follow-up email, and I'll give you some further reading on how to analyze data. Because personally, that's something I really struggle with as well, because I'm not an analytics-driven marketer. I'm a copy and content-driven marketer. So it's only very recently become part of my job where I would have to be like, okay, that's what it says. What does that mean? I often have that same thought you have, and I go lean on other experts to be like, what do I do now? So not knowing what to do is quite normal. It depends how your brain works and how you sort of approach your own marketing. So we will follow up with some resources on that, because that's a really good question. So yes, we'll come back to you with that.
Real. One final question is, when you are creating like your strategy and your campaign, do you have like a set amount of visuals or text that you know that you want to portray, or are you doing it on a day-by-day basis?
Do you mean when you're actually building out the strategy document? Do you mean that?
Yeah.
So the way that we build ours out is we do it in Google Slides, like PowerPoint, and we've got a template that we've created that we use for our clients, and we'll have a certain amount of slides per section. There's probably something I could follow up with again there that we can show you as a bit of a template to work to, so that you've got something you can fill in. But that's basically what we do. We've created a template in-house that we use, and we roll that out for each client because we know it addresses all those things I said in the strategy section. So we can give you a template. We'll do a template follow-up.
Okay.
Cool.
That's fab. Thank you. You've been really helpful. Thank you.
No problem. Thank you. Has anyone got any other questions at all? Don't be afraid to ask. Just speak up.
How about being, sorry, I've got to jump in. I don't know if I'm ever going to see you again.
Go on.
No, I'm messing. Like, how, like, to be efficient, because I've only got about probably 10 hours, less than 10 hours a week, like a day a week doing the social media. So it takes about an hour to schedule sometimes. And then writing copy, like writing a blog post is like long. I need to do SEO for. So it's just like, by the time I do this, it feels like I only can do 2 things. It's like, by the time I write the blog post and by the time I do the thing, hours are gone. So I'm just like, how do I be efficient of writing copy, like 700 words for a blog post? Is there any more, apart from repurposing, any more tips about being efficient when you can't spend a full-time hours on social media but trying to get maximum effect?
Yeah, another really good question. How to be efficient writing copy. I wish I could tell you. I've been writing copy for like 6 years, and sometimes it will come to me in like 20 minutes, and other times it will take me a day to write one thing that normally would have taken 20 minutes the day before. There's so many things that factor into you being smart in your working or efficient in your working. Like your mood that day could have a massive impact on how well you're able to produce something, regardless of the thing you're trying to produce. So outside of those external factors, I've got little control over. What I would say is anything that you can turn into like a series that's repeatable, and you can have a fairly good templated approach to that that doesn't feel like you're just repeating yourself. So for example, an example from our blog, Aaron will post a link to that hopefully in the chat in a sec if he's not done it already. There's a section on our website called helpful stuff, and there's loads of stuff you guys can have a look at in there for resources. One of the things we've got on there is called the Female Founders series, which is what Cass was interviewed on. And essentially that is a repeatable piece of content. I can give that to my colleague Amber and be like, I want another female founder. There's lots of reasons why we're doing this. There's a certain amount of questions we ask. Sometimes we'll simply email that to people if they've got the time and they can fill it in their own time, or we'll call them up and it's done in an hour. You write the piece of content on the call. So if you're able to come up with anything that's like a repeatable framework, like interviews or things that you can basically just turn around repeatedly, that's really good, which is why series are helpful, because it takes the thinking out. A lot of the time you're thinking, your time's taken up with thinking, which is why that slide we've got on brainwriting and sketchnoting is helpful, because it takes all the thinking time out, which is usually where a lot of the inefficiencies are. So if you've got stuff you know you're going to turn up to, that'll help. Another thing that will make you efficient is, instead of thinking of it like Thursday's my day for making content, Thursday's my marketing day, whatever it might be, make a content plan and then just change up the routine you've got around making your content. Because I'll find that, like, for example, there's absolutely no point me trying to do work at 3 o'clock in the afternoon on any day of the week. It is my absolute worst point for productivity, so I don't even try. I put meetings in now because it's easier for me to talk at 3 than for me to sit down and think. So it could also be to do with changing up your routines. And you could be like, oh, I try to do this every Friday and I hate it. It might be because it's the end of the week and you're knackered, so don't try and do it at the end of the week. Like, give yourself a break. Maybe try and do it on a Monday when, like, you've got through your emails, or try it as 2 half days so it feels like you're dedicating more time even though it's the same amount of time. There's quite a lot of stuff you could do there, but change up your routine, a content plan, that there's a template on our website that you can use for that, and also like repeatable series that will save you time and make you feel like you're producing more, for sure. Okay.
We've got a couple of questions in the chat.
Go ahead.
We've got one of Alison saying, hi Ruth, you say to have 3 core messages. Do you take these from your mission statement or your values? Also, do your messages change as your products change, or are they fairly static?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So the difference between brand values and messaging are, your brand values are very consistent. It's not very often that your brand, we've got, like, if you go on our website and look at our about page, you can see our brand values on there. I think we've got 5. They're consistent. We don't really change that at all. Your messaging will change, even though it will still always be in line with your brand values. So say if you're creating a strategy and you're like, we've got an overall strategy we're working towards, but actually it could change on a quarterly basis, that's absolutely fine. You definitely want to be iterating. You don't want to set this thing up in January and deliver it until December, because it may not be relevant anymore. Generally speaking, we plan in like a quarterly basis. So we'll say for the next 3 months, we're dedicating our time to this, because that's enough time for us to get data, like that question that came before. It's enough time for us to know if it's worked, and it also gives us a sense of calm, because we know what's coming up for the next 3 months, and it removes some of that thinking time. What was the rest of the question, Aaron?
It was also, do your messages change as your products change, or are they fairly static? Yeah,
so I would probably address messaging on a quarterly basis. I'd stick with some messaging that you're going to do for like the first 3 months, whatever the 3 months are. It doesn't have to be the beginning of the year, it could be whenever you start it. And I would just be like, that's what we're going to focus our messaging on. And then you can do a bit of your analysis and be like, did that messaging land? Did that help us achieve our goals? If it didn't, adjust your messaging. It's that simple. And there may be some things that you can learn from the data that you've got that will mean you'll be able to make an informed decision about how to change your messaging. again, going back to Malika's point, it depends what the data's saying. Who knows what the data's saying? So we'll follow up with something that's helpful on that will help you understand how to change your messaging in response.
Okay, we've got another question in the chat off Monique saying, any suggestions on where you can get content ideas, talking points to help you with creating content that's relevant / on trend for your business?
Certainly. So the tool that we mentioned, SparkToro, that will give you loads of ideas for content because it tells you the type of people that you're trying to target. It tells you what they talk about. And if you know what your audience is talking about, you know what to make in order to become part of that conversation. So SparkToro is hugely helpful. It's not very expensive. I think we're on the most minimum version. It's only like 30 or 50 bucks a month. It's not a huge amount. And you get like 30 searches, which is quite a lot. If you're a micro business, you won't need a lot more than that. So SparkToro will help. Those 2 exercises we've got that you can click onto, if you get a couple of people in a room, you can honestly turn out like 300 ideas in 30 minutes, which is mad. And that gives you like a couple of months worth of content. So that will help. And then in terms of getting stuck for ideas, I would go back to your competitor analysis and I'd look what everyone else is doing and be like, you're doing that, that's interesting. What can I learn from that? And maybe just try and come up with something that develops or builds on their idea. Equally, it could be that you could become a collaborator with someone. Maybe there's already a successful thing in your space, like perhaps someone's got a podcast that's relevant to what you're talking about. Get on it. Just like turn up and be a guest on it. Like, you don't have to be the creator. You can become part of someone else's content. So think about that as well. I hope that helps. I hope that answers the question. Go on, Maisie, do you have a question?
I have a question. So I'm really new to this. So I'm only just kind of starting to build like my stuff, and I've only just made an Instagram profile. I've not put anything on it. And I think I've been thinking a lot about like color scheme and like what kind of images to use. And I haven't posted anything, I think, because I'm like, maybe I'm overthinking it. Like it has to be perfect.
Yeah.
So I'm kind of wondering if like you think if from the beginning you need to have this like clear idea and kind of like the way it's going to look, or is that something that you can kind of do later on? And if you do it later on, should you kind of create like a new profile that's like shiny and new, or I don't really know how to go about it.
Yeah, that's such a good question. And I think that harks back to one of the main problems I have with Instagram, which is perfectionism. And it's really easy as someone who's about to put a new thing out into the world that you're like, oh, it doesn't look as good as theirs. That means I shouldn't do it. It's a load of shit. Like, just do the thing that feels comfortable for you. So if you try something, all you're doing when you first start a company or when you first start a brand is you're testing your assumptions of the marketplace you're in. Who knows if it's going to land? If you're completely new, all you can do is work on an educated guess, look at what competitors are doing and try. The most important thing is just try. So if you start creating a load of Instagram content and you're like, oh, that's not really what we're trying to do, great, you tested your assumption, you tried a thing and it might work, it might not, that's absolutely fine. There's always an element of test and fail in marketing. So don't think you're going to get it right, because you're not at all. There's loads of stuff that we did at the beginning of our company. For example, we were called something completely different previously. We were called J&R. We sounded like an electrician's firm. What were we thinking? And then we went through this whole rebrand exercise, and now we came up with a thing, Matchstick Creative. And there was so much thought that went into that. And it's only because I didn't do it brilliantly to begin with that we knew how to get there. Yeah. So there's always going to be an element of fail, so that's absolutely fine. In terms of actually getting started, I suppose that comes back to how you've developed your brand and what feels right. So if you've got a clear brand identity, and Aaron can definitely help you with this because he's the king of brand in our company, it's basically like, does that feel like us? If it responds with a yes, post it. It doesn't have to be perfect. And the standard as well has changed very much over COVID. People are doing loads more candid content. They're doing a lot more stuff where it's just recorded on Zoom because that's the tools we have available to us. You can only do what's possible within your resources. So do it and have fun. Try not to overthink it. I'm definitely guilty of that. Try not to overthink it. I know exactly how you feel there. So yeah, does that help?
Yeah, no, that's very helpful.
Yeah. Anyone else got any questions?
We've got a question in the chat saying, off Carice, saying Instagram's colour palette, air collections vary greatly from each other. So she's trying to figure out how sticking to one colour palette would work, as they all have their own colour palettes.
Yeah, okay. So that goes back to your brand identity rather than your product identities. So hopefully you'll have defined what your brand identity looks like and how you want to sound as a brand. and that can inform your feed over what the individual product lines are doing. So say if you've got a collection, you could, particularly if we're talking about Instagram, if you think of Instagram in the grid as well as in the feed, in the grid you could do like a 6 or a 9 block, and it could be about that specific product line, and that could have its own color palette. You can have like micro color palettes within the bigger feed. That works really well and looks really nice. Ultimately, most of your brand identity should be coming through in your posts. So as long as you've got a clearly defined visual brand identity, it should make you feel more confident posting, because you've already thought about it, you've done all your thinking over there. If you've got product lines that vary from that slightly, that's absolutely fine. Just do it as a mini series, like we said before. You could do it as a 3 grid, a 6 grid, a 9 grid. You could do a whole thing about that and talk about the color palette. There's lots you can do to play with that. Again, don't worry about perfectionism. I think there's a bit of perfectionism creeping in there. Instagram's terrible for making you feel that. So yeah, I know what you mean. Does that help? I hope that answers the question. Cool. Okay, I'm aware of the time. If anyone wants to dip out, feel free. If anyone's got any questions, please just keep going. I'm happy to stay on for another 10 minutes. Go on.
I don't want to take over, but is anyone else before I have my little like rant?
Go on.
Okay, cool. Just quick. So I'm having, just because you don't know, if you can't see me, I'm black. So I'm having a bit of an identity crisis on social media, or existential crisis, I don't know. So what happened is, over the last couple of 6 months, my crisis is like, people know my, in the industry, people know my voice for Kassandra, who Kassandra is, but they don't know my brand. So what I'm deciding to do is to just have a separate Kassandra account and just keep it proper brand stuff on there. But it's really tricky because obviously it's matter stuff, which is a part of my values, and obviously I'm black and all that kind of stuff, and that means different things to different people. PR firms are kind of saying, I don't have a PR firm, but PR firms are kind of, or press are looking for, you have to say that you're black, you're a black this, because that's what's trendy. And I'm like, I do want to eat, I do want to like be seen in the algorithms because I'm not paying for anything, but somehow I just feel uneasy. How do I feel at ease keeping saying I'm a black business for press to pick me up? Or at the same time, I just don't want to be known just as a black jeweler, but that's what's topical, that's what people are looking for. The journalists and the people want to say black. So I don't, and also it's weird, like most of the people who buy from me are white women, even though I'm very aesthetically pro-black and whatever what that is. So it's just like, I feel like I don't know how, what I'm asking is, with my long kind of preamble, is how do I just appeal to the person who I want, or just appeal to the people who have my values, but exclude Kassandra the person, but I want to sell, you know? Without always talking about black stuff, because I'm more than just a black business. I love being black, but I am a jeweler, you know what I mean?
Definitely. I'm going to be very cheeky here, and I'm going to partly answer this question, and I'm also going to call on Rachel, who is on the call with us, who is our Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer at Matchstick, who is an absolute expert at this stuff. So I'll answer for myself, and then Rachel would be a really good person to help answer this question. So for me, there was a couple of things that came out there. One of the things you were saying is like, how do I separate my identity from my company? And that's really difficult as a founder, because like, particularly if it's like a person-led thing, there's a lot about Matchstick that's very me, and I'm very intrinsically linked to some of the stuff we've done, and I'm very much the face of a lot of what we do. My business partner Greg isn't, for example, because that's not what he feels comfortable doing, which is fine, because I really like doing that and that fits me. So I think your question around like, I don't want everything about my company to be to do with you, completely fair enough. Set very healthy boundaries, and that goes back again to like your brand identity and your values. Your brand has separate values to you, even if it's informed by you. So you can separate the two and have a happy life. They don't have to be one and the same thing. And I think as well, that thing where if you're talking to PR professionals and they're like, it's on trend to be black, what an absurd thing to say to someone. Like, instead think of it like, does that feel like my authentic self? does it feel like if it's something you want to remove yourself from and you don't want to become this face of a cause, fair enough, don't do that. Instead, just be like, that's not really what it's about for me. This is what the company's about, and this is the relationship I want to have with that. So I think the last thing I'll say is basically like, define what the company is, even if it's informed by you. They're separate things, and that's absolutely fine. You don't have to give yourself up for your company. It's a very difficult thing sometimes, but you don't. And if anyone's asking you to do something that makes you feel uncomfortable, God, just don't do it. I'd never do that. Like, so yeah, I'm going to stop there and let Rachel answer, because she'll be great at answering this question.
Yeah, I try to answer. I think I agree with what you said, Ruth. I think it's about what you are comfortable with always, and it's fashionable at the moment to say you are Black everywhere. That's that's a reality, but you need to be comfortable, whatever it's fashionable or not at the moment, to say Black everywhere. Personally, I'm not. This is not my brand being Black, so I will never do that. But for other aspects of work, I found that the fact that it's now so fashionable to be Black and to say we are Black, make that we can talk about some stuff much more easily than in the past, and that's really cool. So it's really to find the line. The fact that you're Black and that's fashionable, what advantage has it for you? Can you take advantage of it for something you want to say, something you want to sell, something you want to share? But if it's only using the color of your skin, while that doesn't mean anything from you in terms of your product, I don't think that's. I don't think that's the thing to do, to play the fashion Black if you don't feel like that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so if you think about like Beyonce or Celine, right, who I really love, like musicians, they're obviously Black women, right? But fans, no matter what, in a way, Beyonce and Solange still talks Blackness in their own different ways. Or being a Black woman or African American woman, I want to be like in the jewelry world. I still want to talk about my Black or the brand talk about Black stuff, but that's not it. I want to be known for the jewelry. I want to be known for the craft. You know what I mean? But happen to be Black. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
I think that's a very good example of Beyonce, Solange, because that's part of their brand. That's part of their brand. Not now, not because it's fashionable now, but from the beginning they made it fashionable. So that's different. That's very different. And then I would just say, take your time thinking about that. Carry on thinking about that. And if that makes sense at some point with your strategy, it's going to come very naturally, I think, to really use that aspect of your identity.
I think that point you're making, Cass, about like, I don't want that to be the only thing I'm known for. That's just to do with like you being able to live as a full person in society and be seen as equal. If you don't, just don't bloody do it. Like there's ways to do it that feel good to you and don't make you feel uncomfortable and is still of value to your company and your brand. And it may be a bit of a wider conversation. It might be we don't arrive at the answer now, but that's a really interesting thing to think about, and you shouldn't shy away from it. You should only ever do what makes you feel like you and what feels comfortable for you. So that's a great question to ask. That's a really interesting discussion point. Thanks for that. Anyone else? And thank you, Rachel. Thanks.
Thanks.
Okay, cool. I'll ask one more question. If anyone's got anything they want to ask, feel free to say it now, but then we'll wrap up because I'm aware you guys have lives to get on with and you want to go eat food. So if you want to go, it's fine. But yeah, has anyone got one final question? Got something in the chat? Is there anything in the chat, Aaron?
No, there isn't. So only someone to say no more questions, but this was very helpful and insightful.
Good. Okay, that's good to hear. Okay, thank you, everyone. We'll say goodbye at this point. Cass, thank you so much for helping us organise this.
Thank you very much. I really appreciate it because you know, you like the only like social media the agency want to give their time, and it's really hard after, you know, whatever you want to call it, the movement. I've been Black all my life, so I don't know about this. Say it's you like with only like so.
You're breaking up a bit. Sorry, Cass.
Oh, sorry. I was doing something very, very heartfelt. Basically, what I'm trying to say is like, thank you for committing, giving your time when it's not trendy. I really do appreciate it. So yeah, someone says, please tell us where we can get the recording. So you're going to put it in your blog post, and then I'll share it. Yeah,
yeah,
cool.
no
So yeah, I really appreciate it. And I'm sure the whole of the jewelry community appreciates you as well, and hopefully help, you know, jewelers to amplify their voice in a very saturated market. So I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you,
Right,
Cass. Really lovely thought. Thank you everyone for your time. We appreciate you listening to us at all. And we will put it up and follow up with some really helpful stuff for everyone who was in the call today. So thank you, and have a good evening, everyone. Have some rest. Have some time. Bye.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you.
Take
Bye-bye.
care. Bye.